Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I have a few announcements. We got a busy week, but a fun week, I hope. Our Faith in Action ministry is coordinating with the Share the Harvest drive this year. Bags are being put on the table in there, and next Saturday they will be taken to Pastor Leah's church. I was getting worried. The Methodist Church across from the police station here in Hobart at 11 o'clock, and everybody's invited there. If whether you bring a bag or not, we'll be having a small get-together, but please bring desserts. Our Thanksgiving dinner and raffle auction are next Sunday after service. If you haven't signed up yet, a lot of people have, and thank you very much. Please sign up how many are coming and what you plan to bring. The hospitality ministry will provide turkey and ham. Faith in Action meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 on Zoom. Anybody's welcome to attend. There is an interfaith Thanksgiving service at St. Mary's of the Lake in Miller on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pastor Tom will be participating, and all are welcome. The board meeting is Wednesday at 7 p.m., and all are welcome to attend. Pete, you have something to say?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I didn't know you were making the Share the Harvest. Thank you. I just want to reiterate, so Share the Harvest, the list of items to buy is on the table. Whatever you can contribute, you don't have to buy everything, or whatever you can contribute, please do. We're packing the bags on Wednesday, the 16th, Wednesday of this week. As Barb mentioned, and Barb and Michelle have been working hard on these things, the in-gathering, the feast this Saturday at 654 4th Street, which is right down the street, just a block and a half away at the First Methodist Church of Hobart, is 11 a.m. And come and eat, and please bring a dessert. If our church is supposed to bring the desserts, and other churches are bringing, the Islamic Center is coming, and Pastor Leah's church. So we're all providing something. Our role is to provide desserts. So not being a cook myself, I hope people bring desserts. It's a chance at a show of hands of people who are coming Saturday. If anybody else is going to come, please let us know. And again, the bags that we're gathering for Share the Harvest are right out front, and the list of things to buy is right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We are currently streaming our services online. The Joys and Sorrow portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Wearing masks is optional right now, but if you are ill or think you've had contact with somebody who is ill, please attend virtually. Please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. And now silence your devices and take a deep breath. And another. And join us in the spirit of reverence.
Are printed in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Our opening words this morning are by Anonymous. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. I invite you to open your teal hymnals to hymn 1010, We Give Thanks. Rise in body or spirit and join in song.
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today, and thank you for our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. For those that are present, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hand and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between.
Please be seated. So each week we have some time to share our joys and sorrows, milestones, concerns, whatever you carry on your heart. As Barb said, this is a time in our service where we have some private time to weave our community in a particular way. I usually don't want to take up space, but I wanted to share a joy that this upcoming week we're planning on doing a movie showing for folks. If you have ever seen the movie Jacob's Ladder or have not seen the movie Jacob's Ladder and interested in watching it, the original that came out 30 years ago, not the remake that came out a few years ago. It's a movie with some theological significance. It's also a horror movie, so if that's not your jam, you don't need to come. But I just wanted to give the opportunity, one, because it's a good opportunity for us to just have some conversation and watch a movie together. And also, I will be ruining the movie next week for anybody who hasn't seen it by then. So I just wanted to give you fair warning. In terms of the details of when it's happened, we haven't nailed down a specific time. It'll probably be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday evening. But look in the upcoming tomorrow for the finalized details on that. But specifically for folks in this congregation, if it becomes a public thing, then we have to pay licensing fees and all that stuff. So for folks in the congregation. So that's my joy as a movie lover to get to share all of that with you. Other So we have a story this morning that may be familiar to you all in some form, is probably familiar to you all in some form. But this is a somewhat different form for that story. This is, you might be familiar with the story of Adam and Eve or the Garden of Eden. There's a bunch of ideas and thoughts that have been piled on top of it over the years, people's theories of what it means, what it's supposed to mean, what it tells us, what it teaches us. And it becomes overly familiar in a problematic way. And one of my favorite, as somebody who went to seminary, I bit the bug of loving different translations of the Bible. And there's this one scholar, Everett Fox, who has been coming out gradually with his own translation of the Old Testament gradually. And he does it from a very unique way that helps to retain some of the sense of the Hebrew in the way that it's communicated. And so there's kind of 4 scenes in this story. And I'm mostly just going to do his translation. I just made a few small changes. For instance, in our time, who knows what the meaning of their name is? Like the literal meaning of your own name. Does anybody? So maybe about like half-ish, third of the folks in the room. So in our context, some people know that and some people don't. In the Hebrew context, where so much wordplay goes on, everything is very clear, the meaning of the names. And so I swapped out the names for the literal meaning of them. So part 1 of the story, the placement of the human in the garden. At the time of the eternal God's making of heaven and earth, no bush of the field was yet on earth, no plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the eternal God had not made it rain upon earth, and there was no human to till the soil. But a flow would well up from the ground and water at the face of the soil, and the eternal God formed the human of dust from the soil. God blew into the human's nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. The eternal God planted a garden in the land of pleasure, in the east, and there God placed the human whom God had formed. The eternal God caused to spring up from the soil every type of tree, desirable to look at and good to eat, and the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowing of good and evil. The eternal God took the human and set him in the garden of the land of pleasure to work it and to watch it. The eternal God commanded concerning the human, saying, "From every other tree of the garden you may eat, yes, eat, but from the tree of knowing of good and evil you are not to eat from it. For on the day that you eat from it you must die, yes, die." Scene 2. Now the eternal God said, "It is not good for the human to be alone. I will make him a helper corresponding to him." So the eternal God formed from the soil every living thing of the field and every fowl of the heavens, and brought each to the human to see what the human would call it. And whatever the human called it as a living being, that became the name. The human called out names for every herd animal and for the fowl of the heavens and for every living thing of the field. But for the human, there could be found no helper corresponding to him. So the eternal God caused a deep slumber to fall upon the human, so that the human slept. And God took one of the human's sides and closed up the flesh in its place. The eternal God built the side that God had taken from the human into a woman and brought her to the human. And the human said, "This time she is it. Bone from my bones, flesh from my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for from man this one was taken. Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now the two of them, the human and his wife, were nude, yet they were not ashamed." Scene 3. The disruption of the garden. Now the snake was more shrewd than all the living things of the field than the eternal God had made. And it said to the woman, even though God said, you are not to eat of any of the trees in the garden, ... Because in the actual Hebrew text, it goes unfinished like that. The woman said to the snake, from the fruit of the other trees in the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you are not to eat from it, and you are not to touch it, lest you die. The snake said to the woman, you will not die. Rather, God knows that on the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will become the gods, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to contemplate. She took from its fruit and ate, and gave also to her husband beside her, and he ate. The eyes of the two of them were opened, and they knew then they were nude. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Finally, scene 4, judgment and expulsion. Now they heard the sound of the eternal God who was walking about in the garden at the breezy time of day. And the husband and his wife hid themselves from the face of the eternal God amid the trees of the garden. The eternal God called to the human and said to him, who are you? Where are you? He said, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I am nude, and so I hid myself. He said, who told you that you are nude? From the tree about which I command you not to eat, have you eaten? The human said, the woman whom you gave to be beside me, she gave me from the tree, and so I ate. The eternal God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And the woman said, the snake enticed me, and so I ate. And the eternal God said to the snake, because you have done this, damned be you from all the animals and from all the living things of the field. Upon your belly shall you walk, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. I put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. They will bruise you on the head. You will bruise them in the heel. To the woman, God said, I will multiply your pain from your pregnancy. With pain shall you bear children. Toward your husband will be your lust, yet he will rule over you. And to the human he said, because you have hearkened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you are not to eat from it, damned be the soil on your account. With painstaking labor shall you eat from it all the days of your life. Thorn and sting shrub let it spring for you. When you seek to eat the plants of the field, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread until you return to the soil, for from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And the human called his wife's name, Life Giver, for she became the mother of all the living. Now the eternal God made human and his wife coats of skins and clothed them. The eternal God said, here the human has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. So now lest he send forth his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live throughout the ages, ... So the eternal God sent him away from the garden of land of pleasure to work the soil from which he had been taken. He drove the human out and caused to dwell eastward in the garden of land of pleasure, the winged sphinxes and the flashing, ever-turning sword, to watch over the way to the tree of life. So ends our story this morning. I invite you to open your gray hymnals to hymn 402, From You I Receive. It's a fairly short one, so we'll do it through 3 times. Does that feel good? 3 times through. Please rise and bow to your spirit. seated. So, we're in a new series starting today. We have spent the past couple of series focusing on the seasonal Jewish attention to self-examination and the promises that we make to one another, the new year for Jews and pagans generally. And now we're getting close to the Christian season of Advent, of waiting. And is there any time that feels more like waiting time than the week after Election Day? So it feels like we're getting into what we need to get into. So this one is a 4-week series in which we'll be exploring just being. How is it that we just are, without us needing to do anything whatsoever? Particularly in a holiday season that is characterized by so much rushing and doing, Advent has become more and more important to disentangle so much rushing and pushing in our lives, to bring us back to ourselves. The goal of Advent, in the words of one scholar, is to be washed ashore and to make one's way to the stable, stripped of the old spirit of possessiveness in regard to anything. We each have our tendencies towards possessiveness, whether it's dessert that you see on the menu when you go to a fancy restaurant, or it's the fun thing in the window, or if it's just something that you've become accustomed to about the way that you like to live your life. And so one of the benefits of what we had just done over the past few months is doing some thoughtful reflection on what is it that's actually of value? What is it that we want to hold close? What do we want to let go of? And there's a sort of setting a template with each other that I was inviting everybody into. And this season that this series that we're getting into is more about just relaxing into that and seeing what it's like. So I feel very grateful to be a minister. There are so many things about this profession that I dearly love. One of them is the focus on spiritual depth. It was one of those things that I was really interested in before I got into ministry, and getting to spend time and energy on devoting myself to that is a wonderful, beautiful thing. The study of wisdom, I love engaging with that. The continual challenge of going, that sounds good in theory, but in practice, how do we actually do that? And finding a productive way forward can be a delightfully creative endeavor. And so I love that that's a key part of what it is that I get to do as a minister. The devotion to being a witness to the beauty in others is also something that I don't think I would be able to do in any other profession in quite this way. Those moments in a conversation with a congregant where they start to maybe share their heart in ways that they haven't before. Because everyone deserves to have a place where they can do that. And I feel honored to get to make that space for folks. But of course, as with any job, ministry has its challenges. For instance, every movie or book, TV show that I encounter comes with a question: could I use this in a sermon someday? Should I write this down somewhere? And that question is just ever present in one's mind. And there's also this great deal of emotional labor involved. So when I first got my first service job, I was working at a record store, and it was the first time that I had to stand for 8 hours in a day. And I realized that I had to use muscles in my legs that I'd never used in quite that way before. And in ministry, there's an aspect of emotional labor in this, of like, I didn't realize I needed to exercise my heart in this way before. And so there's a particular energy to showing up in that way consistently, which is not to say that I mind it. I actually love it, but there is a certain energy in that. So I found that for ministry to be sustainable for me, I need to be able to fully take off the mantle of minister for a little while. For when I'm not being a minister, to just be a person. And so what does that take to take off the mantle of ministry? One of the congregations that I used to serve was in a small town right next to a small city. And I served that congregation and got an apartment in the city that wasn't too far away. And soon after I moved there, I was looking to make some friends and meet people, and I went to this art show clear on the opposite side of the city that I was in. I wanted to meet some people, maybe form some friendships, to develop a part of my life that wasn't just based in work. And I get to this art gallery, and about a third of the people there are from the congregation that I serve. And so back went on the mantle of ministry. And so one of the things that excited me about the possibility of serving this congregation was that it felt more possible to both fully put that minister role on at some times and fully take it off at other times, to step fully into my professional role in one part of my life and then lose myself in the big city and just be a person, to be close enough to be fully involved in the day-to-day goings-on of the congregation, but far enough away to have a personal life that is fully separate, so that I don't have to always be on. And then to get to commute most of the way by train, a dream that I didn't even know that I'd had. So for me, that's what my sense of sustainable ministry looks like. A fully thriving ministry and service to the mission of a congregation, and a fully thriving personal life in which I can fully let that go for a bit. So when we realized a few months ago that there'd been a miscommunication, that a top priority for some folks in the congregation was to have a minister be closer than that for me to not live closer could feel like kind of holding you all at arm's length, or like I sort of swoop into town and maybe tolerate you for a little bit and then go back home and really let it loose. I wondered, maybe this isn't quite the dream come true that I thought it might be. If the meaning of proximity is so different, how do we find a way forward? In one sense, that's our particular dilemma. But in another sense, that is the universal human dilemma. Will I be met in my hopes and dreams and desires? Should I settle for something other than what I know deep down is really important to me? And if I don't settle, will I be able to find that elsewhere or with other people? One of the parts of the story this morning, the Adam and Eve story as it is sometimes thought of, is the creation of humanity in God's image. And there's lots of different theological interpretations of it, but as Cole Arthur Riley has written, some theologies say that it is not an individual, but a collective people who bear the image of God. I quite like this, she writes, because it means we need a diversity of people to reflect God more fully. Anything less in the image becomes pixelated and grainy, still beautiful, but lacking clarity. And we humans, navigating that collectivity is the tricky part. But I have good news for you, because the season of Advent is not a season of answers. It's a season of sitting in the questions, of letting things be messy and unresolved, of trusting that there is something on the horizon, of remaining faithful to what is utmost importance in the meantime. As I mentioned before in my introduction of the story, there's a lot of people who find particular answers in the Garden of Eden story in Genesis, making lots of grandiose claims about truth and reality. There's a whole lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions that come in that. One of them is that this story is an account of the fall. There's nothing in there about the fall. There's no overriding assumption anywhere in the Old Testament that there's a fall like that. Only rarely does the Old Testament actually get that pessimistic. Maybe if you get into like Hosea or Jeremiah, it starts to sound that way. But for the most part, that's not really something that's actually in there. Another misconception is that it's about evil coming into the world. It's not. The Old Testament typically doesn't really care that much about those kind of abstract statements. It's concerned with faithful responses and effective coping with reality. Another misconception is that it's about the origin of death. But if that were true, wouldn't somebody die in the story? Another misconception is that it's about sex. But there's nothing in the story about sex. There's a lot in there about the political dynamics of power or control or autonomy, but not directly sex. So all of these misunderstandings are based on some overgeneralizations of some more limited interpretations of some things that the Apostle Paul said later on in the New Testament. The text itself is not interested, scholar Walter Brueggemann writes, in theoretical or abstract questions of sin or death or evil or fall. The usual abstract questions of the world, the origin of death and sin, the meaning of the fall, are likely to be false, escapist questions. Such questions are no part of biblical testimony and are of no interest to genuine faith. The real issues of the text may not be posed by seeking theoretical origins. The Bible is not an answer book of the curious questions we may ask. To treat the text as an abstract lesson is to repeat exactly what Adam and Eve did, to privilege the purity of solitary understanding over the messy bonds of relationship.
Say that again.
Sure. To treat the text as an abstract lesson is to repeat exactly what Adam and Eve did, to privilege the purity of solitary understanding over the messy bonds of relationship. So there was a prohibition that had been laid down by God, and one possibility might be like, hey, something's going on with this. God, what's this all about? To use that questioning as an opportunity to dive back into relationship, or to just say, forget this, I'm going to do what I want. As Brueggemann writes, the God that God announced in this story is not a petty God who jealously guards holy secrets or who eagerly punishes the disobedient. This story is rather the anguished discernment that there is something about life which remains hidden and inscrutable and which will not be trampled upon by human power or knowledge. There are secrets about the human heart and the human community which must be honored, bowed before, and not exposed. This is because the gift of life in the human heart and in the human community is a mystery that has not been put at the disposal of human ingenuity and human imagination. We live in a society that offers us so much that we can pay for, that we can procure, that we can bring into our lives, that we can make choices about. And so there's something about the season of Advent of sitting in limitation, the limits of time, the limits of choice, the limits of warmth in the air outside, that can be a doorway into a deeper engagement. The story, from one perspective that I told this morning, is the story of a pivoting point. The story of things shifting from Adam being the one human, Adam meaning human, literally, the one human, to also including others, to expanding out into relationship, pivoting from just being a solitary individual to being part of something larger than oneself. It can be pretty sweet sometimes to just be solitary. There's a certain power in it. Anybody who's ever been single after a long relationship, there's a sense of freedom, like I could do anything I want. And there's also, of course, for those of us who get back into relationships after that solitary time or understand the value of those relationships, there's something about being yoked together that is more limited, but also has a particular sort of beauty and possibility in it. Aloneness by itself tends towards stasis. But facing the other, engaging with the not self, involves dancing. It involves freedom. It involves creatively finding the way forward together. Aloneness, in this context, can also mean that typical like-minded people. When we just get together with people who are of the same mind as us, there is a similar quality to aloneness. But when we gather with people who are other than ourselves, and we need to find the way through those differences, new avenues that we might not have prepared for start to open up. We start to get invitations to go deeper that we couldn't have imagined before we had engaged in that in the first place. To abandon one's belfry grandeur, in the words of scholar Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, to abandon one's belfry grandeur and proclaim a common identity with other human beings is a different sort of living. To be willing to diminish yourself enough to surrender that spaciously godlike role in your own life and assume instead an authentic relational one is to embrace a certain kind of humility. Once again, Cole Arthur Riley, perhaps the more superior we believe ourselves to be to creation, the less like God we become. But if we embrace shalom, the idea that everything is suspended in a delicate balance between the atoms that make me and the tree and the bird and the sky, if we embrace the beauty of all creation, of the givenness of that, we find our own beauty magnified. And what is shalom but dignity stretched out like a blanket to cover the cosmos? True greatness involves humility. That's why all of us are so humble, right? While the story of Adam eating the fruit is often used in terms of original sin as a horrible act of betraying God, all Adam did was fail to stand in the presence of God, to maintain the posture of eternal life. And so what looks like defiance is an abandonment of a difficult posture. That difficult posture of just standing in what is. Once again, Riley, our societies and communities have a way of grinding up and serving out dignity in portions based on our own human ideals and idols. In the history of the white Western world, you can trace a perversion of dignity in the name of usefulness. You are no longer the image of God, you are currency. We cannot help but entwine our concept of dignity with how much a person can do. The sick, the elderly, the disabled, the neurodivergent, my sweet cousin on the autism spectrum, we tend to assign a lesser social value to those whose doing cannot be enslaved to a given output. We should look to them as sacred guides out of the bondage of productivity. Instead, we withhold social status and capital. We neglect to acknowledge that theirs is a liberation we can learn from. I'm afraid to know what my lived experiences really tell of what I believe about dignity. I suspect one day we'll have to account for all those we and our system push to the perimeters. Who would dare pluck a single hair from the face of God? For this reason, I disagree with those who say we bear the image of God only, or even primarily by living out our faith in our labor. The thought is reductive, and it evidences that we are content to exclude those who will never work, who may never speak, who no longer make or do. Their image bearing is not dispensable. It is essential. Our dignity may involve our doing, but it is foremost in our very being, our tears and emotions, our bodies lying in the grass, our scabs healing. I try to remember that Eve and Adam bore the image of God before they did anything at all. And this is very mysterious to me, and it must be protected. Affirming dignity through sticking around, through seeing it through, not needing to change the other, not needing to have something in particular happen, but just showing up and letting the doing go. Finding a home in the circumstances and in the very physical body we inhabit, whatever that looks like, whatever that brings with it. The sort of tinkering with things that we do on a regular basis to get them to be just a little bit more right also has the side effect of it feeling less and less like home. It's neither for you as a congregation to persuade me that I should live closer, nor for me to persuade you that some geographic bounds between personal and private life are key to my health. We're each entitled to the dignity of our sense of ourselves, of what's important for our thriving, of our discernment on that path, and in whatever way that deepens and evolves for each of us, for us to pursue that full flowering and to accompany each other in that dance is the beautiful path that we can walk. And may it continue to be so.
Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith and Action Ministry and a different charity chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the Family Giving Project. For those of us not here today, there is an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. We have our 4 volunteers. Please go and collect the money. We are truly grateful. And now please rise as you are willing and able and join in singing the closing hymn, number 400, in the gray hymnal.
So when you open up to hymn number 400, You'll see some words there that are in Hebrew, and so I'm going to guide us in a little pronunciation. So, shalom.
Shalom.
Haverim.
Haverim.
Shalom, Haverim.
Shalom. Haverim.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. Shalom.
Lahitrot.
Lahitrot.
Lahitrot. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom. There we go. So Jeremy is going to do it he's going to do it 3 times on his own, and then we'll join 3 times together.
Shalom Haverim. Shalom Haverim. Shalom. Shalom. Lahitraot. Lahitraot. Shalom. Shalom. Shalom Haverim. Shalom Haverim. Shalom. Shalom. Lahitraot. Lahitraot. Shalom. Shalom. Shalom Haverim. Shalom Haverim. Shalom. Shalom. Lahitraot. Lahitraot. Shalom. Shalom.
That song I selected to bring us into a feeling of friendship at the close of our service, which is what the song is about. Thank you so much for bringing that to life, everybody. Our closing reading this morning is by the Reverend Wayne Arneson, Unitarian Universalist minister who served in Ohio for a number of years. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. May that ever be so.
The falling leaves outside my window, the autumn leaves of red and gold. I see them blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come on to me. Autumn leaves outside my window, the autumn leaves of red and gold.
but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again. Soup's on.